Well, let's bring you a perspective now from fuel station owners, the CEO of the Fuel Retailers Association, that's Reggie Sibia, joining us this morning. Reggie, good morning, and thanks for your time. And I suppose, yeah, let's answer that question. When can we expect this to stop? When can we expect the arrow to go down rather than up?
Well, it's actually very difficult to predict, but it's certainly not going to be for the short term. I mean, if you look at what is happening with the global markets, you know, and various dynamics that affect actually those prices to go up, and obviously also the weakening rand. So yeah, I think we're in it for some time.
But yeah, that short-term relief that Jeff Radebe did announce in September, I mean, how did that happen? I mean, because from what you are saying, we really have not much control. All prices going up internationally, the rand is volatile, and there are other factors. So how could we have afforded not to have increased fuel in September? I think it went up by 5 cents or something like that.
Yes, look, I cannot comment on the actual mechanics behind it, but I think one has to obviously commend the Minister of Energy for at least trying, you know, to come with some solutions. As you stated, you know, there is a lot of factors that are beyond our control. The reality is that we are still a net importer, you know, of fuel. The reality is that we are facing a weaker rand. That's adding to the situation. But I think there is nothing wrong in looking at the current pricing elements to see what can be done to actually reduce the impact.
So your association would favor a long-term strategy in terms, instead of this intervention that happened out of the blue, because some people were surprised that it could actually, it's possible that we could have a 5 cent increase.
Definitely, I think for all of us, a long-term strategy will actually assist, and I think the department has announced that they are working on that short, medium to long-term strategy, and I think we must actually give them an opportunity to come with that. But, you know, as also fuel retailers, you know, people don't realize that we are actually at the brunt of these fuel price increases. And I'd like to just touch on that a little bit. First of all, I think if you look at some of our costs, they are actually directly linked to the pump price. While at the same time our margin is actually fixed, is cents per litre. That is fixed annually, so whether the prices go up or down, that amount doesn't change. But something changes, and that is the cost of operation. One of those costs is actually the cost of credit cards, you know, and credit cards currently are not even provided for in the margin, because as you can imagine, we are a regulated industry. So it means that our margin must actually cover all the costs. So credit card costs are not in our margin, but what happens is that credit card costs are actually linked to the transaction amount. So if the fuel prices go up, then the cost of credit cards also go up. And that is actually massive. It's actually crippling the profits of the fuel retailers. So that's just one area. And the second area is actually the working capital. You know, for every 1 rand increase, you're looking at an additional requirement of about 100,000 rand to actually order the fuel. So as the price increases go up, the working capital requirements also go up. And those actually two elements, they create a serious pressure point. So
as the Fuel Retailers Association, Reggie, I mean, what part can you play? What is within your power to actually try and help the situation? Would you, as the FRA, be able to go to companies and say, listen, can you help us out? Can you try and absorb some of these increases? Are you able to have any impact on or have any say in trying to help consumers out here? And like you say also, I mean, your own members.
Well, one area that we haven't looked at really is the banks. I have to say that. You know, for us, I mean, the only people that are smiling when fuel prices are going up are the banks, because they're actually making quite a lot on these bank charges, on these merchant service fees, even the trends now with consumers not affording. You find most consumers actually resorting to using credit cards, which then is a ripple effect on both us as retailers and them as well, because it's actually costing you more to buy fuel on credit at the end of the day. So banks also need to come into the party here. They actually need to look at helping us in reducing this cost. You've got no idea We're talking here billions of rands, you know.
But would that filter down to consumers at the end of the day?
Well, it will, because also a consumer pays by using the credit. And if our cost goes down as well, it helps.
Yeah, so we're going to have some discussions with it. It's a multi-pronged strategy that's going to be required. But from now, from your perspective as retailers and from our perspective as consumers, it's tough times ahead.
Very much so. It's tough times ahead. And also, I think as solutions, people, I'd like to just comment on this issue of deregulation. Because for me, I think it really comes from a very uninformed position. You know, if you are a traveler, you've been to other global markets, you know, which have been deregulated for a long time, I've got to tell you bad news. Fuel is not cheap. If you go to United States right now, you know, fuel is actually even a bit more expensive than in South Africa if you were to convert for $1 to a rand. So deregulation does not necessarily drive prices down. What tends to happen is that when it's being introduced, there is that level of competition, but then there's a point where the players start to realize that everybody's not winning in the game, and the prices start moving up again. So we're seeing that in all global markets. I think for me, the solution will be to look at the elements themselves of the retail market, of the total value chain. This speaks to the issues of levies and taxes. It talks to issues of even the BFP. Price mechanism needs to be reviewed. And I think that is actually going to give us a long-term solution than deregulation. And also deregulation, remember, is also going to impact a lot on the jobs, which we so desire in our country.
Now, a question from one of our crew members wanting to know why fuel companies like Sasol would have to put up their prices when they are South African based, they are South African companies. I don't know, just your take on that?
Look, I think what we need to understand is that we are a net importer. So what Sasol produces at the moment does not meet all the needs. I think it.
So they also have to import as well. Sasol has to import as well.
They don't have to import, but I think what they produce does not cater for 70% of the market.
Yeah, so but why do they increase their prices?
Why would they have to increase their prices?
At the retail level, but from a retail perspective.
The second point is then the pricing mechanism in South Africa is based on what we call a price parity mechanism, because it's a regulated price. So you can't have a pump price at Sasol garages, which is cheaper than at other garages, because the pump price right now is regulated. Consumers must pay the same price. So it's because the pump price is regulated.
But that comes across a little bit unfair, because it's locally produced. You're not affected by the dollar exchange rate. Sasol can afford to sell to us at a lesser price.
At a lower price.
Yeah, but it will be unfair competition. I don't want to speak on behalf of Sasol.
Well, it might be
but
something
it will be unfair competition,
especially
because we are in a regulated space. I think when we come to deregulation, that can then be an issue that needs to be discussed. But right now,
they have to
it
play
actually can't,
because
the pump price is regulated.
Okay,
very interesting. Yeah.
That's Reggie Sibia, CEO of the Fuel Retailers Association of South Africa, helping us to understand their perspective and reaction, of course, to this painful price hike that we're expecting from midnight tonight.